But first, no surprise, the Liberals today gave in and said they'd back Labor's rejigged tax cuts, despite it being a broken promise. So some advice for Peter Dutton, the opposition leader. Now to move on to a different target, and I have one. It's a huge Labor weakness that's hurting poorer Australians and threatening the future of millions of young Australians. And I say I have advice when, look, I've got to admit that Peter Dutton's actually been doing pretty well so far. That's because, of course, the Liberals have, I hope, finally learned their lesson from Malcolm Turnbull. Their disastrous decision, insane really, to choose Malcolm Turnbull as their leader some years ago and as our Prime Minister. Choose a vain, treacherous main chancer, an ungrateful and vengeful man who could just as well have joined Labor if it would have made him Prime Minister instead. And it was so bad because not only is Turnbull a lousy, well, he was a lousy Prime Minister who lost 38 news polls in a row before his party finally dumped him. He's also a megalomaniac, now apparently out to smear and tear down just about every Liberal leader he reckons done him wrong or will show him up. Tony Abbott, Scott Morrison and now Peter Dutton. Last night on the ABC, Turnbull was at it again, smirking and stabbing, this time trying to stab Peter Dutton.
If I said the name Peter Dutton, what one word springs into your mind?
Thug.
But Dutton today refused to bite, up to a point.
I think I've proven in the past that I'm able to deal with one liar at a time. And we're now dealing with the Prime Minister who has lied straight to the Australian public, and I don't think Australians will reward that. That's my sense.
Are you a thug?
Have you found me to be a thug? I think some of the narrative is sort of retrofitting a particular purpose.
In fact, Dutton has not been a thug or a bully as Liberal leader. He's led a party that after years of division, particularly under Turnbull, looks incredibly united, no real friction. And unlike Turnbull, with his global warming fixation, Peter Dutton has got the big calls right so far. Interestingly, he has actually fought the culture wars that Turnbull and Prime Minister Scott Morrison after him would not. He fought The Voice, for instance, Labor's plan to divide us by race, and defeated it. Now, yes, he is caving in and saying yes to Labor's new tax package, even though it is a broken promise that steals thousands of dollars from better-off taxpayers and gives $15 a week to the less well-off. But Dutton couldn't possibly stand in the way of more cuts for millions of Australians in battler suburbs.
There are very few Australians who could say today that they are better off under Anthony Albanese than they were under the coalition government. And if you speak to people, economists, business leaders, they are very concerned about the second half of this year as well. So the coalition is not going to stand in the way of providing support to Australians who are doing it tough.
Now, I've argued here for the Liberals actually keeping their word as well and demanding the stage 3 tax cuts be kept, while also matching Labor's bigger tax cuts to lower income Australians. But Dutton said today he couldn't do both, or not yet.
If you implement stage 3 now, in addition to what the Prime Minister's done, and we've looked at all of these options, you need to find about $9 billion a year, which is no easy task. You can't redesign a tax package within a fortnight from opposition. The PBA doesn't turn around costings that quickly.
And they're suggesting they'll do something about bracket creep later, but we'll see. Now, caving in may be politically wise, but it does put Dutton on the back foot now to some extent and leaves the Prime Minister today gloating. In fact, Albanese was demanding the Liberals stick to their word on the stage 3 tax cuts when he didn't stick to his own.
If they are fair income, then their response must be to not only oppose what we are putting forward with our legislation we'll introduce today, but to promise to roll it back. Unless they do that, then it's all just wind.
Yes, but on this issue, we're now down to noise and finger pointing. One side says, you're a liar. The other side says, we looked after the poor. How much the debate will now help Australians doing it tough? About zero. So yes, this advice to the Liberals, point out that Albanese is a liar, fine. But the Liberals now need to shift the debate to something that could help workers and battlers. And here's a big one, immigration. and especially the catastrophic effect it's having on people wanting to buy a house. Today, the Reserve Bank decided not to cut interest rates, in fact, suggesting it might hike them again this year. Now, that's already a problem for anyone trying to buy their first home. But worse is this. This is our net immigration intake over the past 120 years. As you can see, under Labor, it's gone absolutely insane. More than 500,000 people net into the country in a single year. That's nearly 6 times the average over the century. But meanwhile, compare that immigration intake, shown again here in red, to the blue line for houses actually built. We're taking in record amounts of immigrants at exactly the same time that we're building fewer houses for them. Now, building costs are soaring and big builders are going bust, another just this week. And the New South Wales Treasurer today admitted the obvious. We just aren't building the houses we need for the millions of people who now need them, many of them immigrants. The big states are running way behind.
Last year we had about 48,000 completions. We look at Victoria that had about 58,000 completions. We know that we have a lot of work to do to catch up.
And it's not just buying a house that's a problem. This week, new data that there's a record low vacancy rate for flats and apartments in Sydney and near record lows in Melbourne and other cities. This is actually a social disaster. And it's again caused by these insanely big immigration rates. All those hundreds of thousands of new immigrants each year needing homes. And with stamp duty and red tape and green tape, making houses now impossible to buy for many young Australians.
If we do nothing, if we simply tolerate this status quo, then we run the risk of having a landed gentry where some people own homes and some people's ability to own homes depends on whether or not they're going to inherit wealth. And a lot of other people who work very hard won't have a realistic chance of home ownership. He's right.
And like I say, it's a social disaster made worse by decisions taken by the Albanese government. You see, having your own house, when I say social disaster, it's not just a nice thing, something that gives people security. It's also a civilizing influence. Ask yourself, what do people look after more? A house they own or a house they rent? What binds them more to their community? A house they own or a house they rent? What makes a young bloke settle down faster? I'll tell you what, it's a mortgage. And I have a solution on that for the Liberals. Apart from slashing immigration, I mean really slashing, which would be good in so many other ways too, stopping urban sprawl, stopping this terrible crowding of our cities, and also helping national cohesion. Well, the solution is to let people use some of their super to pay their mortgage. Let them transfer that super to a mortgage offset account, money that would go back into their super account if they sell the property. Labor would scream at this. Their union mates running the big super funds would hate it. This would be an attack on their crony capitalism and the way they use our super savings to push their woke agendas on everything from The Voice and global warming to affirmative action. But the former senior Treasury official who suggested this plan to me reckons a couple transferring a maximum of $50,000 each from their super to paying off their mortgage would save $6,500 in interest a year. And I reckon the Liberals should go for this. I mean, this kind of immigration is fracturing our country, lowering wages, crowding out cities, above all, keeping young couples out of their first house. So the Liberals need a new issue to put the heat on Labor. This could be it.